Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 29. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the athletes, coaches, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank all of you who have liked, shared, and commented. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert level guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. I want to also thank our sponsor, Cerberus. Cerberus is an organization that puts the athlete first and actively works towards providing the best quality gear at an affordable price. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus has quickly evolved into a global brand symbolizing quality and trust. Their ever-growing product range is used by the top athletes around the world at the highest level competition, and every single Cerberus strength product has been designed with performance in mind, with the highest attention to detail. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code strength_game to receive an extra 10% off your next order. And in this week's episode, I'm joined by Coach Arianna Luther. Arianna is an assistant strength conditioning coach at the University of Miami, where she leads training for the Hurricanes women's soccer, swimming and diving, and rowing programs. Luther has had previous stops as an assistant strength coach at the University of Reno, Nevada, and as a graduate assistant at TCU. She's also completed internships and coaching work at Temple University, the University of Central Florida, Montana State University, EXOS, and Lindenwood University in their strength conditioning departments. A former athlete on both the gymnastics and Olympic weightlifting team at Lindenwood University, Luther continues to stay heavily involved in lifting and trains in Olympic weightlifting while diving into many other disciplines to improve her student athletes' programs. I'm really excited to have her on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Arianna Luther. What's going on, everybody? I am joined today by a new friend of mine, Arianna Luther. Thanks for joining us. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hey, I know we're a little bit short on time today, so I want to get right into it. What kind of got you started into strength sports, training and competing? And then, because you've done gymnastics for the majority of your life and Olympic weightlifting as well. So what kind of sports did you play growing up leading into your current training?
Yeah, gymnastics was predominant for me. I started that when I was 2. Gymnastics is as we know, most of us, it's an early specialization sport. So that's something that was my foundation. To balance it out though, my mom she made me play soccer and I ran track in middle school. I don't think I've ever told anyone that really, but I say that because they didn't last very long. Gymnastics, it took over my life pretty much. I mean, the training is rigorous, 20 hours a week. I was in the gym by age 8. So I think I started when I was 2, but it gets obviously more intense as you get older, as far as the duration of practices and how many hours, you're putting in a week. So soccer, running long distances was not for me. I was not a goalkeeper, but yeah, I just didn't enjoy that aspect of it. And then track, actually, I liked it. I was a short sprinter, which helped a little bit, I would say, with vault in gymnastics, because that's a short sprint into jumping on a springboard and onto a vault table and what have you. So I just had a choice that I had to make. I think I made that decision when I was about 8 years old. Like, I felt like an adult, basically. I had a sit down conversation with my mother on like which sport I was gonna really commit to, because gymnastics was getting more intense. So stuck with that, and that was my foundation and my base, and went on 16 years of that. Was big part of my life and who I am now, shaped who I am now, and as a person and as a coach. So that's my athletic background.
Yeah, I took the soccer route for a little bit too, but I think I hated running even more, so I was a goalkeeper.
There you go. Maybe I should have done that. I don't know.
It works it comes around at the end. So I want to
Yeah.
get a little bit more into like your gymnastics background a little bit later, but I wanted to also touch on like how you actually got involved in coaching. You've kind of been a little bit everywhere. Obviously, you've been traveling coast to coast, and now you're an assistant strength coach at Miami. So can you touch on a little bit like your route and path to kind of like get to this position now, and then maybe a little bit of how your athletic experience has kind of based and shaped your philosophy with your athletes now?
Hmm. Yeah, coaching for me didn't come into the picture until college. I had a roommate. I always reference her because early conversations before I actually committed to exercise science as my major in undergrad, those conversations happened with my friend Claire. She's working actually strength and conditioning in the military now, which is amazing for her. And I know some coaches that are going that route. And so because of COVID and other things, and her own personal decisions, she's doing that now, so I'm super happy for her. But Claire and I were roommates freshman year of college, and I went to Lindenwood University it's near St. Louis, Missouri, right outside the city. And that was she knew what she wanted to do from the jump, and I was still undecided. I don't think I've ever said this on a podcast before. I actually was a dance major before I switched to exercise science. Something I didn't know. I was like, I'm just here. We're figuring it out. And it's something I enjoyed just because of like that stemmed from gymnastics too. And I'm like, this is not long-term. I don't know what I'm doing. So having those conversations with my roommate was super beneficial. And she just encouraged me to try just a foundational exercise science course. So I did that my sophomore year and decided I really liked it. It's nothing like, it's no crazy story. It's just something that piqued my interest. I took a class and stuck with it. And especially like, I was a gymnast in college. I actually was a walk-on. They didn't have a program my freshman year. So I walked on my junior year, and I was only on the team for a year, just some injuries and things like that. But yeah, a part of being on the gymnastics team, you have to have strength and conditioning as well. That was part of it. And I just loved being in the weight room. That was kind of like my first exposure to was collegiate strength and conditioning. And our strength coach, Pat Dolan, was amazing with us. And I loved being in there. So I was like, I don't know what it is that this guy does, but let's keep taking these courses and figure out more information and go from there. So that was kind of like the foundation, but like you said, I could go on forever. Been coast to coast, lots of internships, private sector. I was at EXOS in California back in 2014, and then went a bunch of different places, Montana State, in Bozeman, Montana, like beautiful places too, which partly was my choice because I was like, well, if I'm going to work for free, I'm going to be in a place that's has some other cool things to check out. So was there. I was at UCF in Orlando. I was at Temple University in Philly. TCU was my graduate assistant position in Fort Worth, Texas. University of Nevada, Reno, for that 6 months of full-time work and 6 months of COVID. Got laid off my job due to budget cuts, and then now here at Miami. So lots of moving pieces, but happy to be here.
Yeah, that's a crazy kind of intro to everything that you've been doing in coaching. And it's kind of cool to hear how it all started at Lindenwood. I know you did gymnastics, you did weightlifting there, and to kind of hear dance was in the mix as well. Like pretty eclectic like background between like all your playing and like all the coaching experience you get. How do you kind of like take all those different experiences, whether it be from athletics or from like coaching? How do you take all those things that you've kind of been through in honestly a pretty short amount of time that you've been like involved in like the actual coaching profession? How does that kind of put together and make your own coaching philosophy? And then like some of your athletic background, how do you utilize that stuff to actually benefit your athletes and create a program?
Yeah, I think we always have to, as coaches, we have to look at who coached us. And when you're a child, you learn a lot growing up of, okay, the experiences you do have is the coaches you had as a kid. And a lot of, you hear coaches talk about like, I want to be the coach that I never had growing up, because maybe they didn't have the information that we now have, or the research wasn't out then, but it is now. So there, certain things like that. But for me, like as a gymnast, my coaches were like my second set of parents, because in a sense, I almost saw them more than I did see them more than I saw my own parents. So that's kind of an interesting take with the duration per week or hours per week of practices. I love my coaches. I haven't kept up with them like I did for a while after I was done, but recently I haven't. But they always wanted what was best for me. And there's some things like you learn, and I'm not here to speak ill of anybody. But I think we learn from the good and the bad of all of our experiences, and they cared for me. I mean, obviously they were with me 20 hours a week. Like if they didn't want to be there, we wouldn't be having practice. But at the same time, gymnastics has an edge to it. I think, there's a lot of stuff that has come out lately, even like in the news and things like that. Like it has, not to put it, not lightly, but an abusive nature to it, whether that's mentally, emotionally, things like that. Physically, we've seen, obviously, unfortunately, like in the news, some certain things there. But yeah, it's something that I've seen a lot of what I wouldn't do. I'll say that. I won't go into detail, but as far as like, we learn time management. I'll say that we definitely learned time management. You are not late. So, and like 30 minutes early is on time. So as far as learning principles like that you can carry into life, that's something that has prepared me as a coach. But there's certain ways that, I look at that, I wouldn't do it that way per se, but that discipline piece, the time management piece, all of that is there. And I think for a while we learn a lot of unhealthy patterns growing up of how to cope with things or deal with things. But I think as you get older and as you mature emotionally, those things we can transform that into more of a healthy route. So a healthy discipline about things and healthy time management. So I think as I've matured, like those things have transformed in a positive way, which has been really great. And then trying to think what else. I didn't say this before, but I also dabbled a little bit in Olympic weightlifting as well. But that did not continue because I had 2 shoulder surgeries. So learning a lot about life in a sense of you make plans sometimes of things that you want to do and accomplish, and they don't always work out the way that you had set in your mind, and that's okay. So I had a coach when I was at Lindenwood. They have a really good program there. It wasn't like an official sport, but they call it student life sports. And for some reason, we just bred Olympians. So Fernando Reis is an Olympic weightlifter from Brazil. He's actually out here in Miami, which is an incredible opportunity. He works at Hybrid Performance Method and is the Olympic weightlifting coach there. And so a lot of strength coaches have heard of Hybrid and Steffi Cohen and that staff. So he's over there now, but I met him in undergrad, and he really introduced me, besides my strength coach for gymnastics, introduced me to Olympic movements. So he helped me with that. And then a lot of guys on the team would help coach me in a sense. And that was my Olympic weightlifting foundation, which is not a bad place to start. So I'm like super thankful for that. And then it's full circle now that Fernando's out here working at Hybrid. So I get to see him from time to time, which is cool. But I will say he was super patient with me as a coach. And so I learned that, these movements are intricate and they are complex and they don't happen overnight. So with that, I've learned as a coach, I need to be patient with my athletes if I teach them Olympic lift derivatives or the full lifts themselves. So I look at that as a 4-year process because I've been doing it for a long time. And sometimes I'm like, I still don't understand how to do a clean. Like, I'm exaggerating, but there's moments where I'm like, I'm still messing up here or there, or I need to go back to the blocks and work on my second pull, or, whatever the case is. So, yeah, there's just being patient with the athletes. That's something that I've learned to kind of implement with them as well, that I've learned from coaches that coached me. So yeah, and just like not being so hard. I mean, we need to have standards, but not being so set on certain things. Like if a kid comes in late, like I ask, where are we coming from? What's going on? Because a lot of the times it's something that someone is going through. And there's certain standards where it's like, yeah, you overslept. Like you missed the mark. Like that's not okay, and holding them to that. But I'm not so on them if someone rolls in late, like I used to be. And I say that because you just never know what people are walking through. And we've had kids late and it's like, hey, my aunt just died. And so I'm not going to start screaming at somebody when I don't know this whole story. So I think that there's a lot of grace there with that. And that's extended into my coaching as well. So
That's great. There's a lot of great things you can take away from all those things. And I really like what you said about, like, in the beginning, maybe you weren't so aware, being young, kind of getting involved in gymnastics and everything, that there was a lot of things you were learning from different habits, but maybe they weren't necessarily healthy ones. And now kind of looking back, you can kind of tweak those because you have the skills of time management and discipline and everything, but you can morph them into more healthy, sustainable habits. And that's
right.
kind of one thing. I mean, from an outside perspective, the only person I really know was heavily involved in gymnastics was my brother. But like I was telling you before, he started really late in the process. So by the time he got going, there were kids that already had 10 years under their belt.
Yeah.
And he was like 14 at the time. And it was crazy to see that he was trying to catch up. But like just kind of seeing the whole process of everything, it's vastly different. And you're put in situations where they try to accelerate very quickly. So it's interesting to kind of take a step back and take the characteristics you developed and turn them into better habits. And you can now pass those on to your athletes, which is awesome. Kind of touching on some of the setbacks that you have. I mean, from the unfortunate situation, like with layoffs and everything, and then like injuries within your own athletic experience, like you're still finding ways to train. And like you said, some days just cleans aren't working, or just like you completely feel like you have no idea you're starting from square one. What's your kind of current training look like? And as a strength coach, why do you think it's important, even though you have such a thorough background and knowledge, why is it still important for you to still kind of push the boundaries or keep learning, whether it be on the platform or just in general, kind of sharpening the tool?
Yeah, I'm super fortunate, and I say this, the story of kind of how I got here. For me, like I believe, I'm like, okay, this is God is the reason that I'm here. Like I had a 1 in 300 chance of getting this job. Of course, people are like, well, who did you know to get in? Like, who'd you know to get in? And I have a friend here, I do, and he's amazing. And we knew each other from Temple University, because now that staff, Coach Feely, for football, on the football side of things, they're here, and we share a weight room. Olympic and football we share. So my friend Jordan and we actually create programs and together. So either he'll write one or I'll write one, and we try different things. So that's kind of what we've been doing lately. Like we did some tempo work, or like we're always doing some sort of Olympic movement. I've been playing a little bit with, I work for Simply Faster on the side. And so I have a VMAX Pro that they had sent me. So I've been playing with that a little bit, looking at bar path and just peak velocity and things like that. And because we have Tendo units here, but we don't have VMAX Pro, and like there's there's push band, there's a lot of stuff out there. So I'm just playing with it and learning. But him and I, like we joke, we're trying to like run. We're like, we gotta learn how to run. We gotta learn how to sprint. I work with soccer, so I'm not trying to be out here looking like a fool. So as far as like, we've been doing some like acceleration work, things like that. And then it's funny because I don't know if you know John Garish, but he's out here as well, up in Boca Raton, which is like, what, 45 minutes north of us. And so like, I'll send him videos and be like, coach me, coach, like, or my terrible accelerations. They're subpar, but we're working on it. So like different things like that, where it's like, okay, we want to do what our athletes do. And I'm not always doing the same exact program as my women's soccer, but you know, if they're front squatting, it's like, I know how to do a front squat, etc. Like, I'm comfortable with all the movements I'm giving them as well. And so we try a bunch of different things. We've been adding in some more plyometric work, contrast training, like doing some sort of heavy strength movement with some sort of jump is what we've been doing lately. Just seeing how our bodies respond to it, and just trying to stay athletic, honestly. So as long as possible, we never want to let ourselves go. So that's how we do that here. And we also have, side note, Dr. Brian Mann is here at the U. So we're going to be doing like some testing and stuff with him in the fall. This, like, I came here in October last year, so I was like, I'm not going to test them in the middle of, like, this just doesn't make sense. And then January came, and like, people were still super spotty with like getting COVID and like being taken out and putting back. So I was like, we're just not going to test this year, and we're going to try it in the fall. So we're going to play with some stuff with him too, as far as like an ISO mid thigh pull and some force velocity profiling, which I like have never worked with. So I'm here to learn from my coworkers and then Dr. Mann. So, and just putting those pieces together and supply our athletes with the best of the best that we can provide them during this weird time.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of resources around that area that you can kind of pull to, but it's cool to see that even the people on staff or with your own training and everything, like, you're still trying to kind of perfect everything, give the athletes the best product, and kind of simultaneously work on your own things, which is definitely cool to hear. I wanted to touch on one thing that I really thought was important too, and especially it might be athletics in general, but I think you see it a lot from the two sports that you kind of were heavily involved with, gymnastics and Olympic weightlifting. Like you said, athletes get involved at a very young age. They're training a lot of the time. Coaches are second parents almost. And for some countries, that's their livelihood right away. And it stays like that forever. But you see it even with athletes at our level, like Division I athletes. We might have them for 4 years, and some may go play pro, or some, this might be the end of the line of their career, like really competitively. And when you see athletes that kind of build an identity around their sport, and they spend their whole life defining themselves like that, and then it kind of disappears and they're left with, who are they now? Like, how do you kind of work with those things? I mean, oftentimes that happens where I'm a gymnastics athlete, I'm a weightlifter, like, to the point it just consumes them. Like, in your experience, is this inherently a positive or negative thing? Did this kind of happen to you at any point when gymnastics was over, or when you were transitioning to weightlifting? Or is this even an avoidable thing in your opinion?
Yeah, I think this question is super complex because everybody has different environments that they grew up in. Mine specifically, as far as like identity is concerned, I identify as a daughter of the king. So like, for me, my faith is so important to me. I never used to believe in anything growing up. And so with that, my identity was, I was a gymnast. And so when it was over for me, that was a very difficult time. And it's kind of an interesting story, but like, long story short, I stopped my junior year of high school gymnastics. And then I picked it back up 3 years later, which is like crazy, because if you go away from soccer and you come back, you can like be a little bit rusty and like pick it back up, I feel like, pretty easily. But with gymnastics, it's like, it's strange to go away from that and then try and come back 3 years later after not training for 3 years. So that for me was pivotal, because during those 3 years, in between that time, my sophomore year of college is when I, for me, heard the gospel for the first time and like truly understood it. And for me, that's when I made my own personal decision to follow Christ. So my identity is in that foundation. It's not in my work. It's not in my sport. It's not in anything else, because all of those things are temporary and are fleeting. And there's a start point and there's an end point with all of that. But my identity in Christ, that is everlasting. Like, it doesn't end. So for me, that is the foundation. And that's something that I always go back to. So things changed, obviously, when I was in college. And so my sophomore year, when we got a team, I was like, wow, because the reason that I had stopped before was a lot of fear that I had. It was like a lot of mental block issues. I had to see a sports psychologist in Chicago. My mom would drive me out, because we lived an hour from the city, every week for months to try and quote unquote fix me. And it wasn't working. And so in college, when my life essentially changed, I knew that I was like, wow, there's no fear in love. Like, I have nothing to fear anymore. Like, I felt free from that. And so that was my decision to walk onto the team, because I was like, I don't have to be held in bondage by this anymore. And so that's when like that whole thing changed for me. And then unfortunately I had injuries, and then I got shoulder surgery. I was diagnosed with compartment syndrome in my shins. I was a vaulter. So like compartment syndrome, and as a vaulter, like, it just doesn't work. Because I think if I'm not saying, hopefully I'm saying this correctly, it's like 9 times your body weight that goes into the springboard. So that impact is great. And my body just couldn't handle it anymore. And honestly, you peak in gymnastics when you're like 14. So, and at the time I was like, 21. So like, when you go way past your peak, physically in the sport, it's just difficult to keep up with everything. And so, yeah, I think in my work now, my goal everywhere I go, wherever my feet are, is to be a light. Is everyone going to believe in what I believe in? No, I realize that. But I think with how I live my life and how I love people around me, I can bring joy to people. I can help make people's day. I can bring a smile to people's faces who maybe were down that day, or just inquire like how people are actually doing versus like, hey, how's it going? Good. You know, like actually getting a little bit deeper once there's a relationship somewhat formed. So those things make a big difference. And I do that with my athletes too, and just care more past like, hey, how's your back doing? I heard your back was, your back, you're on the injury report for your back. How's the low back doing today? Obviously, we still ask those questions as strength coaches, but diving a little bit deeper of where do they come from? Like how did they grow up? Like, we're both parents in the picture. I'm not going to sit here and try and wear a hat that's not mine. Like, I'm not a sports psychologist. We have people that, I point them to these resources that we have on campus so that they can get professional help, because that's not my job. But I think to an extent, as a strength coach, we can be a voice into certain things. And like, when gymnastics was actually done for me, like past college, I wasn't struggling. I actually was injured, and as a walk-on, my coaches had released me from the team. So they had a conversation with me, and they were just like, hey, I wasn't costing anybody money. So it was weird. I was just like, I don't know why it's over, but it's over. But for me, like, immediately after I left the office, I remember I was asked by my pastor, like, hey, do you want to go on this mission trip? And I was like, I can't. We got nationals for gymnastics coming up soon, and we have training. I can't make it during spring, like our spring break period. And they dismissed me or released me from the team because I wasn't providing a product for them. And so, which I understand, I wasn't able to produce. But I left the office, and I immediately called my pastor. It was literally 6:00 in the morning. And I was like, I'm coming to Ecuador. And then I went on that mission trip that I previously could not go on. And that trip was like life-changing, of course. And so it was just like all these crazy events where I just had this ultimate layer of peace of just like, yeah, these things didn't work out necessarily the way that I thought that they would, but I'm not rooted in that. I'm not rooted in gymnastics. Like, it's something that I did to bring glory to God, but it's not my everything. And so I have other things in my life, like, as far as like, I can go and I can love people in this facet, or now I can focus a little bit more on my studies. Whereas before I was at practice, like there's certain things that I could fill my time with and still have purpose. Like, just because you're not doing your sport anymore or competing anymore, your purpose doesn't stop. And so I think just remembering that, like, my purpose and my mission is to love people the way that I've been loved first. And so in order, like, that happens everywhere. I don't have to be a gymnast to do that. I can do anything and still accomplish that main mission and purpose. And I carry that into what I do now, which is here at the U. I mean, that's like every interaction I have with athletic trainers or PTs or my student athletes, like, they may not get that from other places, but I know that I can add value and bring that to them. If they're not getting it anywhere else, like if they don't know that they hold value, I want to be that person that tells them how valued and how worthy they are. Like, if they don't get playing time, that doesn't mean you're any less worthy. That doesn't mean that you're any less valuable. So I think just being that voice in their ear to remind them on the sideline or whatever it is, like, that they still are valued. That's big, because you see a lot of them, if they're not playing, they think that they're worthless, and that's not true at all. So I just want to kind of echo that truth and that reminder to them. So
No, that's great. I think, like you said, we're not sports psychologists, or we don't try to overstep our boundaries as strength coaches, but we do wear a lot of hats. And I think we're teachers, mentors, for some of them, best friends, or big brother, big sister kind of thing, or for some of them, maybe even like kind of parental figure, whatever it ends up being. We're kind of a jack of all trades, where we just try to be what we can for them in that moment. And it's great to kind of see that you dive deeper and you look at them as people, rather than just like, you're the starter, you're the backup, you're this athlete. And I think that develops a longer lasting relationship. I think it builds buy-in with them, even if it doesn't make them a better athlete necessarily. It makes them a better person. And I think in turn that makes them a better athlete. But I think even if you're not someone of faith, finding some sort of purpose that drives you more than just being an athlete, where you're just clinging on to one thing that it has a clock on it. It's ticking at some point. So if that's the only thing that you're looking forward to, that's the only thing that kind of keeps everything together for you, it's going to be even a harder fall when that's over. So finding a way to show some value in other ways and have a purpose, that's huge advice for anybody that's kind of stuck as, I'm this blank athlete. So
right. Yeah. Like, where can I have impact, I think, and like finding that for you, whatever that is for you. And so that can be accomplished in so many different ways. So like, when you're done with your sport, you can move on to whatever work at it, whatever job you're going into, and finding your passion there too. But also knowing that jobs come and go. I mean, I'm a prime example of not a job just, oh, don't have one anymore. I didn't know that was coming. And so it's like, when you're rooted in something greater, that helps a lot with just staying rooted, like, and staying grounded, I'll say. Yeah.
no, it's great advice. I think on the flip side of that too, coaches sometimes get caught into that trap of, well, I'm this sort of coach, or I'm a coach, like, all the time. Like, there's still other things outside of it. And like, being a collegiate strength coach, that the hours are going to be long. You're going to be sucked in, like, you're going to be pulled away from family or friends or other things. So finding a way to have a purpose outside of just what you do in the weight room is huge. Kind of on the flip side of this, it kind of pertains to you. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Do you see that there's any sort of like struggles being a female strength conditioning coach in like the collegiate profession? We kind of know the stigma involved in it. I hopefully don't fit at all. I'm not bald yet, but it's bald white guys with beards is what anybody you ask probably is the first thing they kind of think of. Have you seen that there's been like any issues with like you coming up into the profession that you think that other people need to be more aware of, or things that like even coaches in my position can do to be more welcoming or encouraging of females in the profession?
Yeah, I think coming up a little bit into it, I didn't think anything of it. I just worked with whoever I was given, and I worked with a lot of male athletes in my internships. Meant like specifically, one reoccurring one was men's basketball, and I think just, I mean, we're coaches, right? Like there's not male or female. Like I'm a coach, you're a coach. So I think just being confident in your position, being confident with your competency and your voice on the floor, I mean, that does wonders. But I think everyone has their preconceived notions in their brain. I mean, maybe that's something that was learned when they were growing up, things like that, and that they don't even know. There's athletes that don't know that they're thinking this way, and they're thinking that way, you know. I guess you can call that like an implicit bias. And so yeah, I even like, I asked a couple of football players. I worked with football in the summer leading up to camp at TCU, and so it was all hands on deck. And I remember my boss at the time had stopped everybody, like they were lifting and stopped everybody. And because a lot of them like wouldn't even like, not a lot of them, there was a few that wouldn't even like look at me when I was giving them corrections. And I was like, so I told my boss, and he stopped everybody and was like, she has this background, this background, this background, like you better listen to her. And then from that day on, everyone was like, yes ma'am, yes ma'am, yes ma'am, like anytime I said something. So that helped, having that backing. So sometimes we need that, to be honest, is for someone to step into the gap and say who is of higher power, and for them to say she's qualified, listen to her. Unfortunately, that has to happen sometimes. And I even asked one of the players what the issue was, like what he thought. And he wasn't one of the ones that had any issue with, or, couldn't look me in the eyes or whatever. He wasn't one of them. He was very respectful. And I asked him, what do you think holds back some of these athletes from being able to like receive feedback from me? And he had said, it's because you can't lift the same amount of weight as me. And so I gave him an example about how it's relative to body weight, right? So I gave him like a squat example or something, and was like, okay, if you weigh 300 pounds and you can back squat double your body weight, that's 600 pounds. Yes, that is more weight on the bar than what I can squat, but I can also back squat double body weight. So relatively, it's the same level of strength. So if I gave that example, he was like, oh, okay. Like, oh, I get it now, so it's like, oh, you're just as strong as me, but in a different way, because you're a smaller person, because men and women are just different. So like that helped kind of click, the light bulb went off there. So sometimes it's like, you need to just give an example like that helped there. Or you need someone to stand in the gap. But you're always going to have someone who's not going to respect you for whatever reason. That may stem back to their childhood. That's nothing that I can control. Like I didn't parent you growing up, Right. So you do the best you can. You're confident in your abilities. And I think just providing more opportunities for us too. Like we're seeing obviously more women in the NFL, NBA, things like that. So I think those opportunities being provided is huge. Like being able to, and one really to look up to is Coach Hootie at Texas. I mean, she was at Kansas for a long time and has such an amazing background and works with obviously men's basketball. So, and has great respect there. So I think, I think providing those opportunities is huge. I remember one time I was laughing because I was like, I don't even think this is real, but not back in the day, like not even too long ago, I interviewed for a job for the Orlando Magic as one of the strength coaches, and was like legitimately interviewed. And I was like, this is what we need, those opportunities And even talking to the head guy at the time, some of these men, like, it goes a little bit psychological too, but some of these guys unfortunately grew up with just a mother. A lot of our football athletes and men's basketball specifically. And so that female voice is something I've seen from men's basketball, having years of different teams, working with different teams. They respect women. And a lot of that stems back to their background of just having mom in the picture and really respecting the female voice. And for the Orlando Magic at the time, like, that was something that they were looking for. And so again, they provided that opportunity. I was able to interview, and because of COVID, I don't even think they ever hired somebody, but like that is big for us. But yeah, I think in conferences, more opportunities to speak at conferences, asking women, hey, do you want to present at the CSCCA on X subject, like different things like that. It is big, but we're all coaches. So
Awesome. Yeah, that's interesting. I never would have thought of that too, like kind of almost a motherly voice, or just a female, like with some of those athletes who maybe grew up in they're a single mom. That was it. So that's great. I know you got to run pretty quick, so we end the show like any good training session with a finisher. So we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and overtime. So we can go rapid fire. So I know you got to get back on the floor. So you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Biggest influence in strength and conditioning, and biggest influence in either gymnastics or weightlifting.
Oh, okay. I'm going to start with, if it's rapid fire, weightlifting, I'll say Fernando Race. I already mentioned him earlier. Gosh, gymnastics. I used to watch 1996 Olympics on tape back, because we're early 90s baby. So we still had the VHS tapes. So I'll say I really loved Dominique Dawes. She was amazing. Oh, Carrie Strug. Sorry, there's a couple there. So I loved watching them growing up. And strength and conditioning influence. Gosh, there's so many. I feel like someone's gonna get mad if I leave them out. So I haven't worked with him directly, but have been on the phone with him a bunch. And he's been pivotal in my career from like a faith aspect and coaching aspect. So I'll say Donnie Mabe at University of Texas.
Okay. What can you be found doing when you're not coaching or training? What are some of your go-to hobbies now that you're down in Miami?
Ooh, okay. So beach, obviously. I probably could eat a taco for every meal of the day. So that's kind of alarming, but also amazing. So probably eating tacos and the beach, eating tacos on the beach. So just put them together. And I like to read, which a lot of people don't do these days. I read books, crazy. And what else? What was I gonna say? Cooking. So I used to be like, my cooking used to be absolute trash, but COVID kind of changed my life. So been trying like all these different recipes, and I like just cooking, meal prepping, trying different things. Yeah, that's been
There you
fun.
go. Yeah, you can pretty much do all those on the beach in Miami, so that's
Yeah.
good. If you weren't coaching, what do you think you would be doing? And if you could have gone pro in something other than gymnastics, what sport would have it been?
Oh my gosh. Wait, what was the first question?
If you weren't coaching, what profession do you think you'd be doing?
Okay, I think I never would have said this maybe a couple years ago, but I would say some sort, like speaking of some sort. Um, I almost went to seminary, so that's also a random fact. So I think like speaking in front of large amounts of people is something that does not make me nervous. So like something like that. And then sport. Oh my gosh. Pro. Maybe I almost would say sprinting, but I know Coach Garish would laugh at me if I said that because I run like a gymnast. Oh my gosh. I don't even know. Does diving count? Being a diver?
I would have figured it would have been weightlifting then.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess if I had perfect shoulders that didn't need multiple surgeries, Olympic weightlifting, because that's fun. But maybe diving too, just because of the kinesthetic awareness from gymnastics.
Yeah, that's a cool transition one for sure.
That'd be
Hey,
fun.
so if you had to set up an ideal training day, what's your go-to music? And you kind of maybe said it during your hobbies, but what's your post-training meal look like?
Oh gosh. Okay. So music, I never play it unless I'm by myself. I love R&B, but like nobody trains to that. And I respect that. So I just keep that to myself. I love R&B, like old school, new school. That's what I listen to honestly when I train. I don't like this new rapper stuff out here in the world, this millennial. Like it's just, there's too many, Lil Baby, Dub Baby, there's too much going on. So I would say if I was by myself, like I love R&B, amazing. Post-training meal. Oh my gosh, I love chicken thighs. I don't know what it is. Marinated too. Chicken thighs, some sort of like sweet potato, whipped, preferably. And then like, this is what I made yesterday, so it's on my mind. Like broccoli and asparagus, something like that. Get some greens in there, you know? A little starch, a little protein, some greens. It's perfect.
Yesterday must have been a good training day then.
So yesterday was what, Sunday? I didn't do anything yesterday, but I meal prepped for the week, and so that's what I made for the week was chicken thighs, asparagus, broccoli with a slight char, because that's, put it on the high broil, you know, and then some sweet potatoes. Amazing.
I gotcha. All right, so last one I got for you for overtime. What's either your favorite under the bar memory, like either training memory or coaching memory?
Ooh. Coaching memory. I'm trying to think of a specific one. I feel like this is where someone would say, oh, we won a national championship here. I haven't worked with anybody where we've gotten that. So it would be something like that, but I haven't been in that scenario yet. Honestly, what brings me joy is like, I'll just say this because we did it the other day and it was the funniest thing ever. I've been trying to find ways for like some of my teams to just be excited about the weight room. And so for swimming, I learned this from Zach Dakin at TCU. But basically at TCU, they do this Omaha challenge with baseball, and it's so fun. Like, it's just the funniest thing ever. And they do blackout goggles, and they take 2 pool noodles, and it's like one person versus the other. And like, you place the pool noodles down, they have to find the pool noodles blind. And then whoever like body shots first gets a point. So I did that with the swim team the other day. And honestly, I almost peed my pants. Like, it was the funniest thing ever. And then we lifted right after and had a great lift because they were just so amped. Like, so that was, I mean, that's off the cuff, but that was so fun. Then we did that the other day and had a great session. So
that's awesome. Hey, well, Arianna, I can't thank you enough for coming on. How can people get a hold of you if they've got any questions they want to follow up or just kind of follow what you got going on?
Yeah. I'm not going to give out my phone number and my garage code, but I don't even have a garage. But my Instagram is just my first and last name, Arianna Luther. And then my Twitter is Arianna _Luther. And those are just predominantly what I have. And then my email, if you email, is aluther@miami.edu.
Awesome. Hey, well, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. Like I said, there's a few coaches that I talk to and they say only great things about you. So I'm really excited we got the opportunity to get you on and chat about a lot of stuff that's been interesting to me about actually getting a hold of you. So I can't thank you enough for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, take care, Coach.
You too.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com. where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.